I don't know what I'm going to do. They won't stop pounding on the door. They won't stop calling my name. And before long, someone with keys is going to come to unlock my office. I don't know what to do. I'm completely out of my element here, and all my brain can come back to is the coffee. The coffee. The goddamn coffee. First cup of the morning? He asked me, and all I could do was smile at him. He must be new, I thought, because if he had been here longer than a week, he'd have known how often I visit this machine. I stood before the coffee pot like a worshiper at an altar, and as the savory black liquid entered the pot, I felt my mouth water. First cup? Yeah, right. I started my day with the taste of warm, fresh brewed coffee. As I cooked my breakfast, I'd have another, savoring this one like I never did the first cup. And as I sat down to catch up on my emails, I drank a third as I ate my breakfast. I'd had another on the way to work, savoring the aroma as I sat in traffic, and now it was time to get a cup before I sat down for another day's work. First cup? Try fifth. I've been like this since I was a kid. My mother was a career nurse who drank coffee by the pot, not the cup. As a single mom trying to keep up with an active son, there was never a time I can remember when coffee wasn't a part of our lives. When I was just a tyke, my mom was constantly running late due to my inability to get moving in the morning. No one wants to lose their job because of a kid who can't get ready, so one morning she gave me a sippy cup full of coffee sweetened with milk and sugar. No surprise, I took to it like a fish to water. The other parents looked at her funny when she told them and heard the usual sermons about it making me hyper or my growth being stunted, but always felt that she knew better. The fact that I was never prone to hyperactivity and I grew to top out at around 6 foot seems to have proven that their worries were groundless. Now I drink it black, and often, and it has become the axis that my life rotates on. Coffee is life for me. It runs in my veins, and I always joke that when I die, I'll donate my body to Starbucks so I can be their flavor of the month. That cup's looking a little rough, don't you think? I turned to see Chuck wandering into the break room, unrecognizable health smoothie in his "my body is a temple" shaker cup. The new guy greeted him as he came in, and I extended my hand for a fist bump. As he met his knuckles with mine, I couldn't help but shudder a little at how scaly and clammy his skin always is. You'd think that with all that rabbit food he ate and all those healthy shakes he drank, he could put something into his diet to fix his skin condition. It's got character, Chuck, unlike whatever you're drinking there. Chuck laughed. Is character what you call the mushrooms growing into the bottom of that thing? He was right. Not about the mushrooms, but the state of my cup. I'd had this cup for 3 years, and in that time I'd never once bothered to wash it. The outside was a little stained up, but otherwise looked normal. The inside, however, was a black cauldron of old coffee stains and filth. It didn't look that bad to me, of course. I had gotten used to it by now. I always justified it by telling myself that I was putting boiling water into it, so anything living there was likely boiled out of existence by the time I got around to drinking the coffee. But I had no idea what I was setting myself up for. The hot liquid splashed into the cup with a luxuriant sound. I swirled the contents around the cup before taking a test sip and gasping in pain. It was much too hot, but I had known that already. I talked with Chuck for a few more minutes, and when Mr. Ryan strode into the break room, we all said our goodbyes and left for our desks. Mr. Ryan was a fantastic boss, but he had a very narrow opinion of dawdling and socializing on company time. I said hi to a few people on my hall and stopped at Rob's door to pass a few words. He was hard at it already, and I could see his tongue sliding across his teeth beneath his lips, a nervous habit he'd had since elementary school. His dark hair looked sweaty, and when I asked him if he was okay, he said he had to make an 8 a.m. deadline, but maybe we could catch up at lunch. I said that sounded great, and as I walked into my office, I saw Lisa was already behind her computer too. Lisa was a mousy new girl that had moved into the office across from mine a few months ago. She was about my age, with straight brown hair that she always piled neatly on her head and a pair of cute little black glasses that she was constantly pushing back onto the bridge of her nose. She didn't say much, but we waved at each other most mornings, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a little crush on her. She waved back, smiling in her shy way, and went back to work as I stepped into my office and closed the door. I sat the coffee on my desk and turned on my computer as I prepared to start another day. I'm an IT specialist, so most of my job is fixing other people's problems. There was an email already from Janice about how her monitor wouldn't come on, and another from Steven about his issues with networking. I sipped my coffee as I read these, testing the hot liquid with my lips before committing to a sip, and reaching for the phone so I could call Janice. Janice was a frequent caller, and the IT guy before me had thought it would be funny to give her the most ancient of our relic computers. I'd been keeping this dinosaur running for years now, and every time the budget committee told me they didn't have enough money for new computers, I died a little inside. I called Steven, and after a few questions, it became apparent that his problem was his own making. He'd opened up another questionable email, and now his computer wouldn't link to the network. This was by design. Steven was notorious for opening anything that found its way into his inbox, and he'd brought the network down several times with his sort of behavior. I logged in remotely and reverted to a previous state, and it solved his problem. The virus hasn't been that aggressive, it seemed, and he thanked me for helping him. I reached for my cup and found it was empty. I'd been sipping the coffee while I was on the phone with Steven, and I drank more than expected. I called Janice and asked her what was wrong with her computer. And after a few sentences, I reached into the drawer and found a new power cord. Her computer seemed to burn through them for some reason, and I'd recently made a note to keep some in stock. I locked my computer, grabbed my coffee cup, and figured I'd stop for a fresh cup on the way to Janice's office. I stepped out into the hall, turned left, and stopped dead in my tracks. My cup shattered to the carpet floor and drew the attention of the creature at the end of the hall. It was hideous. It had a bulbous gray head that was covered in coarse black hair with small white eyes. Its jaw lolled open to reveal a mouth full of sewing needle teeth and flicking a red tongue that seemed to move over them constantly. It was dressed in a white button-up shirt and a pair of black slacks, but the shirt bulged with coarse black hair and the pants looked like they could barely contain his odd-shaped legs. He looked at me for a second, eyes blinking in odd succession, before raising a hand and asking if I was okay. I shuddered and felt my knees unhinged as I slid to the wall. He sounded like Rob. Rob's voice was coming out of that creature's mouth, and as it did, I could feel my mind slipping a little. What the hell is going on? Had I been drugged? Were they playing a trick on me? As the Rob creature made its way up the hall, I saw another thing stick its head out of the break room. It looked like an enormous bat head stuck into a business suit, and in one clawed, scaly hand he held something that looked like Chuck's smoothie shaker. He didn't even look real. They looked like photorealistic movie monsters or images from horror sites where someone has drawn creatures just a little too well. As the Rob creature got closer, I could see little sores on his skin, long curly hair sprouting in places between the eyes, and I felt a scream ripping its way up my throat. The Chuck creature blinked its two big eyes at me. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" It came blundering out of the break room and towards me, and I felt my legs finally take orders as I backpedaled toward the exit door. It was 30 feet away, down several hallways, but I felt I was motivated enough to run a mile in a minute flat. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong, and until I knew what was going on, I wasn't sure I could trust any of my senses. I had come up to my office door when my back met resistance, and I realized I had bumped into someone. I turned my head woodenly to see the new horror I had blundered into and felt a fresh scream rip through me. It was a spider, a giant spider, but with a body on top of its abdomen like some kind of fantasy creature from a video game. The torso was vaguely feminine. Breasts poked from underneath a blue cardigan that hung from its shoulders, and its 8 chitinous legs clicked on the floor as it took a step backwards to access me. It looked at me with familiarity, and I could see that above its 8 rotating eyes it had shiny black hair piled onto its head. 2 eyes seemed to be covered by thin metal glasses, and I blundered towards my door as I realized who it was. The spider thing was Lisa. "Sorry, are you okay? I didn't mean to..." I didn't let her finish. I pushed my way into my office and slammed the door behind me. I locked the handle, pushed my chair under it, and cringed against the furthest wall I could get to. What in the hell was going on? Had that been real? What was I seeing out there? That couldn't be my colleagues. Could it? They sounded like them. They even sort of acted like them. But the creatures out there had been so nightmarish that I couldn't even process them. All I could do was huddle under my desk, knees pulled up to my chest, and try not to cry as someone knocked on my door. "You okay in there?" It was Chuck. "You scared Lisa half to death, man. I think she's crying in her office right now. Maybe you should come out and apologize." I stiffened. Lisa was crying? Had I done that? I couldn't bear the thought that I'd made Lisa cry. I had half risen from under my desk when I got myself back under control. This wasn't real. The monsters were trying to trick me so they could get me out of my office. I sat back down under my desk and squeezed my knees to my chest again. They wouldn't trick me like that. I wasn't going to be fooled so easily. Chuck banged on the door, harder this time, and asked what my problem was. Rob's voice made an appearance as well, and he apologized for startling me. They were worried about me and wanted me to come out so we could sort through this. They were scared for me and wanted to see me. They got angry at how I was acting and started banging louder all the while I just huddled under my desk and sobbed quietly. I couldn't process what was going on or why this was happening, and all avenues seemed to come back to the coffee. Someone had drugged me. Someone was fucking with me. Someone had done this to make me freak out, but why? That was when the phone rang. It jangled merrily in its cradle, unaware of the horror show just outside the door, and I looked up over the edge of my desk like a cartoon character. I almost expected it to grow fangs or sprout eyes, but it didn't. It just continued to be an average black plastic phone. I reached out shakily for it, and as my sweaty hand settled around it, I felt its solidity and had second thoughts about my perception. My desk was still here, my computer still hummed peacefully. If this was a world of monsters, then how could all these things exist? How would a monster type with his big clawed hands? How would he sit in a normal chair? How would he pick up a phone? As I picked up the phone, I heard Mr. Ryan's calm voice wash over me. It took me a minute to realize he was calling my name, and I was just sitting there in the calm warmth of my realization. "Hello, sir?" I said, and my voice only shook a little. "Are you okay?" His voice was calm and rich and made me feel like control had been restored. I don't know, sir. I'm seeing some weird stuff." "Have you imbibed any substances today?" "It's okay if you have. I just want to know how we can help you." "I just had a cup of coffee in the break room and coffee at home. I was fine when I got here, sir, and now I don't know what's going on." "I'll be there in a few minutes. Just wait there." And he hung up the phone before I could tell him about the monsters. I hung up the phone and sat huddled under my desk. He wouldn't be able to get here, not with the monsters there, and even if he could, would he be normal? Maybe this was another trick by the monsters. I sat under my desk, shuddering and waiting for the creatures to break my door down and get me. They had stopped banging and shouting, but I could still hear them scuttling around out there. They were waiting for my guard to drop, and then they'd have me. 4 loud knocks made me jump and hit my head on the desk. "It's Mr. Rhines. Come to the door. Let's talk about this." I slunk from under my desk, looking for all the world like a scared rabbit, and approached the door like I thought it might explode. Are the monsters gone?" He didn't reply right away, probably hoping he had misheard me. Monsters? I put my mouth close to the door jamb and whispered, "The monsters that are out in the hall." No monsters. Why don't you let me in so we can talk about all this and get everything straightened out? Your friends and coworkers are worried about you and are anxious to get this sorted out. My hand shook as I sent it struggling towards the doorknob. I must have been wrong. Maybe I'd just had a psychotic incident or something, and now everything was back to normal. I had acted like an ass and scared the hell out of everyone. It was time to go face the music. Maybe find out what all of this was about. And as I wrapped my hand around the doorknob, I was sure that everything would be back to normal when I opened the door. As the door opened, the worst horror of all was before it. He was a demon. His skin was the color of burnt pork and was awash with cracks and blisters that opened and oozed as he stood before me. His hands were cruel claws sprouting from the cuffs of his Armani suit, and his wings extended like a miasma behind him. His face was a wide, lolling mouth, eyeless and earless, with a massive set of ram's horns that curled above the door jamb that he hulked in. When he opened his mouth, I heard the voice of Satan himself. The lilting voice that had invited Eve to eat the apple, and I knew that I would never be able to deny him if he spoke. Now then, let's see what all the... I slammed the door in his face, and they've been banging at it for nearly 30 minutes now. So here I sit, writing my experience in hopes that someone will take something from it before they burst through my door and get me. As I write this, though, a sobering feeling occurred to me. There's a mirror in my desk, and as I write this, I can't help but look at the drawer and fight the urge to pull it out. As I sit here, panicked, afraid that I've somehow found myself in a world of monsters, I never stop to think that maybe the problem is me. Maybe I've lived inside a delusion my whole life, and something in that moldy coffee cup triggered me to see the world for what it really is.